Hello, Year Nines. I hope you're all well. And I thought I'd make this video just to make, hopefully, a bit more sense of week 3 and 4's activities related to the textbook that you've been going through. First things first, I realise this is not straightforward, and if you're finding it hard, it is not because you're stupid. It is because it is difficult. So please do not make uh, that a reason to just give up. Because look, like I said, the stuff we're learning about in uh, this particular course is so important. It's such an important moment in history, and going on in later life, your knowledge of this particular moment in history will inform you to understand lots of different things and lots of different references. So, just as a little reminder, this course is about how Germany goes from a democracy to a dictatorship. And what you're asked to do here is look at the particular period before 1929. 1929 is seen as a kind of turning point for Germany, but 1929 comes after a certain set of events and a certain set of moments in Germany that we need to learn about. And this is today's title, because today's title really you should have got down into your exercise book, digital exercise book, is how stable was Germany before 1929? So we're going to see areas in which Germany was stable and areas where we could already see some of the weaknesses that are going to come, because we know what comes next. What comes next is a period of instability for Germany. So the first thing you needed to do was copy this diagram. I don't expect you to remember this off by heart. If we were in lesson, maybe I'd do that, but just for you to get a sense of some of these terms, the things I really want to point out is Chancellor, which is kind of the German version of our Prime Minister. And that's what Hitler eventually becomes, and then he kind of gets rid of this whole system. The Reichstag, which is the parliament, our version of Germany's version of a parliament, and the president who selects the chancellor. Okay, and that's worth bearing in mind. So let's just go through the questions. I hope it was quite straightforward, the fact that I'd given you the page number. Question number 1, Berlin, was the place. And this suggests that Germany was quite a stable place, quite a positive place, people wanted to visit. Question number 2, it was ruled by a Kaiser, or a monarch, a king, and afterwards it was ruled by a president and a chancellor in the Weimar Republic. Question number 3, the radical and extreme groups that existed. On the right, you had groups like the Nazi Party, but also other groups of right-wing extremists. And on the left, you had the communists, who were, as we learnt about in Russia, taking power and wanting to give power back to the people. They were seen as radical and extreme as well. So the far left and the far right. Who was the stabilizing force in ruling Germany, and why? Well, during that time, there was a person called Stresemann who was seen to be stabilizing. He was chancellor at one point. He was in the center, and he was seen as trying to stabilize Germany. How popular were the Nazis in the 1928 election? Not very popular, and you should have, on page 3, got a good statistic for that. Question 6. How much money did they have to pay? 6.6 billion. And when the Germans refused to pay it in 1923, there were invasions of a particular part called the Ruhr part of Germany that the French invaded and took back because they weren't getting their money that they had demanded from the Treaty of Versailles. What was the Dawes Plan? So if you go to page 4, just as an example of how you do this, you could, and this is a really important lesson, even if you don't know the answer, you could in your notes write the Dawes Plan was ... and then wait for the answers to come, and then you can fill it in. But there's no point just saying, oh, I can't do that question, so let me leave it. Rephrase the question, make sure you're answering it in full sentences, and then turn to page 4, and you will see mentions of the Dawes Plan. Under the Dawes Plan, reparation payments were spread over a longer period, and the USA offered to support Germany. So that's what the Dawes Plan was. It was a reduction of the speed in which this money had to be paid back. Okay, so we go back to the questions. Question number 8. What were the signs at 1929 that Germany was in a stable? 1928, sorry, that Germany was in a stable or a good way? Well, again on page 4, if you go back to page 4, you will see there was mention of thriving culture, but also that the levels of production were the same as before the war, and they regained their status as the second greatest industrial power in the world. So economically, things seemed pretty good. Okay, so these are things that made people think at the time, well, Germany's in quite a stable way. What did the Germans believe about their politicians, and why was this such? Oh, sorry. Question number 9. What experienced the Golden Age after World War One? Well, that's the culture, and you can give examples as opposed to there of the German culture. Cinema was emerging as a new form of art. Number 10. What did many Germans believe about their politicians, and why was this such a threat? Many Germans believed that politicians were in it for themselves, and this was a threat to democracy because there was a lack of trust in politicians, particularly people who were in the centre, who were seen as liberals, who didn't stand for a particular politics. Many Germans believed they were in it for themselves. Who was von Hindenburg? Hindenburg was elected president, so that's who he was. And he was ironically opposed to democracy. For someone who was elected president, he didn't like democracy. He wanted to return to the Kaiser. He was a conservative. Which parts of the economy prospered? Which did well? Well, particularly we said industrial production, so factories, and there's more specific mention on page 6 of which particular industries. What was the 25-point program and who announced it? It was announced by Hitler, and it was a new program for the Nazi Party. What appeal did Hitler have as leader of the Nazi Party? He was a strong speaker. He was seen as very strongly anti-Semitic, and that was quite popular with a lot of Germans at the time who were themselves quite racist towards Jewish people. What was the Munich Putsch? The Munich Putsch was an attempt by Hitler to to take power by force in Munich, and it failed. List the ideas as he set them out in Mein Kampf. I'm not going to answer that because that, again, is just on page 9. You can copy that. 17. What changes to the party did Hitler make after leaving prison? Well, he moved towards this, what we refer to, maybe not in the textbook, as the electoral strategy. But that basically means he gives up on this idea of taking power by force. He wants to win power by elections. And this is a very crucial change because it's actually, and this is maybe a shock to some people, how Hitler eventually takes power, or gets power anyway, some of it is by winning elections, not by using force, although he does use force as well to help him win those elections. We'll get to that more soon. Soon. Question 18. How popular were the Nazis in 1927-28? They weren't very popular. Most workers instead supported the Social Democratic Party or even the Communist Party, who they believed worked for them, supported the workers. And the Nazis weren't really popular at all. Germany was quite stable. People didn't really want to vote for the Nazis. They got about 3% of the vote in 1928 in the election. That's going to change, though, we're going to see. Where did the Nazis receive support from early on? Well, they got support from anti-Semitic people, big business, who really were scared of the communists and believed that the Nazis were a good way of protecting themselves from these communists who wanted to take the wealth of the big, rich businessmen. And that's where a lot of their support came from, as well as people who'd given up, who'd been part of the war, people like Hitler himself, and felt that Germany had been betrayed by their November criminals, if you remember from the first week or second week assignment. There's people who gave up on the war in those kinds of Germans' eyes, and surrendered basically to the British and the French. What job was Joseph Goebbels given, and why was this so important for his later success? Well, Goebbels is a very famous, notorious figure because he was given the role of propaganda, and this was important because the Nazis were very successful at developing propaganda, which, as we know, propaganda being media used for political purposes. It was a very successful tool that the Germans used to develop their support. The Nazis used to develop their support in Germany. Task 3, draw the table below. Again, I'm not going to go through the answers on that because I think most of them are straightforward. This question here, I'm going to do a separate video on how to do the exam question, but for now I hope that is useful and I hope you're all well. Take care.